3 weeks into the formal partnership agreement, the human Iberian research facility had grown into a sprawling complex that seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. Atmospheric processors hummed day and night, slowly cleansing Nibiru's poisoned air, while construction crews worked around the clock to build laboratories that would house the most ambitious scientific collaboration in galactic history. Zephyra stood in the primary research lab, watching Dr. Martinez and Dr. Tanaka work alongside bioshaper Nix and engineer Caldor. The sight should have filled her with hope, two civilizations working together to push the boundaries of what was possible. Instead, she felt the constant weight of their deception pressing down on her like Nibiru's toxic atmosphere. The quantum coherence patterns are stabilizing, Dr. Tanaka reported, his instruments tracking the behavior of a bio-quantum processor that was significantly more advanced than their original demonstration. Integration efficiency has improved by 300% over the past week. It was true, but not for the reasons the humans believed. The Iberians had been working desperately to reverse engineer their own ancestors' knowledge, using human technology and processing power to brute force their way back to capabilities they had once possessed intuitively. Every success felt like a small miracle, but also like a temporary reprieve from inevitable discovery. The medical applications alone could revolutionize healthcare throughout the galaxy, Dr. Martinez added, her excitement genuine despite the circumstances. Bioquantum diagnosis could detect cellular irregularities decades before they manifest as disease symptoms. Nix's chromatophores flickered with a mixture of pride and guilt. Our ancestors would have called it listening to the body's song. Each individual's quantum signature tells a story of health, potential, and purpose. Could this technology be applied to human physiology? Dr. Martinez asked. I mean, could humans learn to interface with bioquantum systems directly? It was the question Zephyra had been dreading. Human integration with bioquantum technology was theoretically possible, but it would require levels of consciousness field manipulation that the Iberians themselves were still struggling to recreate. The process would be complex, Caldor replied carefully. Human neural architecture is quite different from Iberian consciousness patterns. Integration would require significant adaptation on both sides. Admiral Harrison chose that moment to enter the laboratory, her presence immediately commanding the attention of everyone present. Over the past weeks, Zephyra had learned to read the human commander's expressions, and what she saw now made her blood chill. I need to speak with the Iberian Council, Harrison said without preamble. We've received some interesting intelligence that requires immediate discussion. The request was phrased politely, but the undertone made it clear that refusal was not an option. Zephyra exchanged worried glances with the other council members before nodding her agreement. They assembled in the neutral chamber, which had been expanded and equipped with both human and Iberian technology. The space had become a symbol of their cooperation, but now it felt more like a courtroom where the Iberians were about to be judged. Admiral Harrison activated a holographic display that showed a section of space Zephyra didn't immediately recognize. Our long-range sensors have detected something interesting in the outer system. It appears that Nibiru isn't the only planet that has experienced recent catastrophic events. The display zoomed in on a dead world orbiting Nibiru's star at a much greater distance. The planet's surface was scarred with the aftermath of massive geological upheaval, its atmosphere stripped away by some unknown force. We've designated this world Nibiru Gamma, Harrison continued. Our initial surveys suggest it was once inhabited by a space-faring civilization that possessed technology similar to what you've described. The ruins we've found include structures that appear to be bioquantum processing centers. Zephyra felt her heart stop. If the humans had found actual examples of advanced Iberian technology, they could compare it to what was being produced in the research facility. Any significant discrepancies would expose the depth of their current limitations. Gamma was destroyed approximately 50,000 years ago, Harrison said, her eyes fixed on Zephyra's face. The geological evidence suggests the planet's crystalline core was deliberately destabilized, causing a cascade failure that rendered the world uninhabitable. The timeline matched perfectly with Iberian historical records, but not in the way Harrison was implying. 50,000 years ago, The Nibirians had indeed been a space-faring civilization with multiple colonies throughout their star system. But Gamma hadn't been destroyed by war or accident. It had been abandoned when the colonists decided to return to Nibiru and pursue a more harmonious relationship with their home world. Our archaeologists believe Gamma was the victim of a bioquantum weapon system, Harrison continued relentlessly. Something that turned the planet's own consciousness integration technology against its inhabitants. It was a completely incorrect interpretation of the evidence, but Zephyra could see how human minds, conditioned to think in terms of warfare and conflict, would reach such conclusions. They had found the remains of bioquantum technology, and assumed it had been weaponized. The implications are concerning, Commander Chen added. If bioquantum integration can be turned into a planet-killing weapon, then the security protocols surrounding this research become exponentially more important. Defense Coordinator Thane leaned forward, his warrior instincts engaging even as he struggled to maintain their deception. You're suggesting that our ancestors were responsible for the destruction of Gamma? I'm suggesting that bioquantum technology poses risks we hadn't fully considered, Harrison replied. Risks that require additional safeguards and oversight. Zephyra felt the carefully constructed framework of their partnership beginning to crack. The humans' interpretation of the archaeological evidence was wrong, but explaining the truth would require revealing details about Nibirian history that would expose their current limitations. The destruction of Gamma is indeed a tragedy, she said carefully. But your interpretation of the evidence may be incomplete. Our historical records suggest that Gamma was abandoned rather than destroyed. Abandoned? Dr. Tanaka looked skeptical. The geological evidence clearly shows massive core destabilization and atmospheric stripping. Sometimes, Nick said quietly, the greatest tragedy is not the destruction of a world, but the loss of the knowledge needed to preserve it. The comment was cryptic enough to allow multiple interpretations, but Harrison's expression suggested she was drawing conclusions that made Zephyra increasingly nervous. I think it's time for complete transparency, Harrison said bluntly. If we're going to continue this partnership, we need full access to Nibirian historical records and technological databases. The potential for both beneficial and destructive applications requires comprehensive understanding. It was the demand Zephyra had known would eventually come, but she had hoped to have more time to prepare for it. Full access to their records would reveal the extent to which their current knowledge was incomplete, undermining everything they had built over the past month. Such access would require preparation, she said slowly. Our historical records are maintained in formats that may not be immediately compatible with human information systems. How long would such preparation take? Harrison asked. Engineer Caldor stepped in smoothly. The integration would be complex. Our records are stored in bioquantum matrices that require conscious interface to access. Simply downloading the information could result in significant data loss or corruption. It was technically true, though the real issue was that many of their historical records had been lost when the planetary consciousness was disrupted. They could provide access to what they still possessed, but it would reveal the gaps in their knowledge that they had been trying to conceal. Then we'll need to establish bioquantum interface capabilities for human personnel, Harrison decided. Dr. Martinez has shown promising adaptation to your demonstration systems. We'll begin with her as our primary interface volunteer. The proposal was logical from a human perspective, but terrifying from a Nibirian one. Bioquantum interfaces required levels of consciousness manipulation that could be dangerous for beings not evolved to handle quantum-coherent thought processes. If something went wrong during the interface, it could kill Dr. Martinez, and end the partnership in a way that would be catastrophic for both species. The process carries significant risks, Nix warned. Human neurology has not evolved for direct quantum consciousness integration. Attempting too much too quickly could result in permanent psychological damage or worse. What kind of risks? Dr. Martinez asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her survival instincts. Consciousness fragmentation, Zephyra replied honestly. Quantum field exposure can cause awareness to split across multiple dimensional states simultaneously. For beings not adapted to the experience, The result can be a form of madness that makes normal reality impossible to perceive. It was a real danger, but also one that could work in their favor. If the humans believed that bioquantum integration was inherently risky for their species, they might be more willing to accept Nibirian limitations and work within controlled parameters. Admiral Harrison considered this for several long moments. What level of integration would be safe for initial trials? Limited data access only, Kaldor suggested. Basic historical records and theoretical frameworks. Nothing that requires deep consciousness immersion. And how long would it take to build up to full integration capability? Zephyra felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. Their answer would determine whether they could maintain their deception long enough to make it reality, or whether they would be forced into increasingly dangerous gambles with human lives. Years, she said finally. Perhaps decades. Bioquantum consciousness integration cannot be rushed without catastrophic consequences for all involved. It was the truth, but presented in a way that served their need for time. If they could convince the humans that patience was essential for safety, they might be able to maintain their partnership long enough to actually develop the capabilities they were promising. Harrison's expression revealed nothing of her thoughts. We'll proceed cautiously then. But I want regular progress reports and complete transparency about any limitations or risks you discover. As the meeting ended and the humans departed, Zephyra realized they had successfully navigated another crisis, but at the cost of making even larger promises about future capabilities. The deception was growing more complex with each passing day, requiring ever more sophisticated lies to maintain. But it was also forcing them to push the boundaries of what they thought possible. In trying to recreate their ancestors' achievements, they were developing new understanding of bioquantum principles that might eventually surpass what had been lost. The question was whether they could achieve those breakthroughs before the humans discovered that their ancient wisdom was actually desperate improvisation guided by half-remembered legends and impossible hope. Dr. Sarah Martinez floated in a specially constructed bioquantum immersion chamber, her consciousness dancing on the edge between human awareness and something far more alien. Crystalline matrices pulsed around her in patterns that spoke to quantum fields older than human civilization, while bioluminescent interfaces monitored her neural activity with a precision that bordered on telepathy. Neural coherence holding steady at 67%. Bioshaper Nix reported, her healing appendages weaving complex patterns as she maintained the delicate balance required for safe human bioquantum interface. She's adapting to the quantum consciousness overlay remarkably well. Zephyra watched the process with a mixture of pride and terror. Over the past 2 months, they had achieved something that should have been impossible. They had successfully taught a human to interface with bioquantum systems at levels approaching true consciousness integration. But each success brought new dangers, both technical and political. I can feel the information flowing, Dr. Martinez whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been present before the integration began. It's not like reading data. It's like remembering something I never knew I had forgotten. The statement sent chills through Zephyra's system. Dr. Martinez was describing exactly the kind of consciousness expansion that made bioquantum integration so powerful and so dangerous. The human doctor was accessing information at levels that transcended normal cognition, touching the edge of quantum dimensional awareness. Bring her back slowly, Zephyra instructed. We don't want to risk cognitive displacement. As the immersion chamber powered down, Dr. Martinez opened her eyes with an expression of wonder and confusion. The historical records, they're not just information. They're lived experiences, quantum-preserved memories of consciousness itself. Engineer Kaldor exchanged a meaningful glance with Zephyra. Dr. Martinez had stumbled onto one of the fundamental principles of Nibirian consciousness preservation, the idea that memory and experience could be stored in quantum matrices and accessed by compatible minds. It was knowledge they had been hoping to lead the humans toward gradually, but Martinez's rapid adaptation had accelerated the process. What did you see? Dr. Tanaka asked, his instruments tracking quantum resonance patterns that defied conventional physics. Nibiru as it was before the convergence, Dr. Martinez replied, her voice filled with awe. Cities that were alive, technology that thought, consciousness flowing between individuals and machines like music. She paused, struggling to process experiences her human mind was barely equipped to handle. But there were gaps. Important sections where the memories were damaged or incomplete. Zephyra felt her chromatophores betray her alarm before she could control them. Dr. Martinez had detected the very limitations they had been trying to conceal. The fact that much of their advanced knowledge had been lost when the planetary consciousness was disrupted. Damaged how? Commander Chen asked, his tactical mind immediately focusing on the implications. Fragmented, Dr. Martinez explained. Like trying to read a book where half the pages have been torn out. The theoretical frameworks are there, but the practical applications are missing. It's as if the civilization that created these records had forgotten how to use their own technology. The observation was devastatingly accurate. The Nibirians had indeed lost their intuitive connection to their ancestors' achievements, retaining only partial understanding of principles they had once mastered completely. Interesting, Admiral Harrison said, her tone deceptively casual. That would explain some of the inconsistencies we've observed between your current capabilities and what the archaeological evidence suggests should be possible. The comment hung in the air like a charged particle, carrying implications that made every Nibirian in the chamber tense with apprehension. Harrison was letting them know that she had noticed the discrepancies between their promises and their performance. Knowledge preservation across geological timescales is always problematic, Defense Coordinator Thane said carefully. Even the most advanced storage systems degrade over millennia. Of course, Harrison agreed. But it does raise questions about the viability of this partnership. If your people have lost access to the knowledge we're hoping to share, then our collaboration may be based on false premises. It was the confrontation Zephyra had been dreading. The humans had discovered enough to know that the Nibirians were not the repositories of ancient wisdom they had claimed to be. The question now was whether they could salvage the partnership by reframing it as a mutual voyage of discovery rather than a one-sided transfer of knowledge. Perhaps, Zephyra said slowly, that's exactly why this partnership is so important. Human analytical capabilities combined with Nibirian intuitive understanding could recreate what neither civilization could achieve alone. Dr. Martinez sat up in the immersion chamber, her eyes bright with excitement. She's right. The quantum consciousness interfaces I experienced weren't just about accessing stored information. They were about creating new understanding through the combination of different cognitive approaches. Explain, Dr. Tanaka demanded. Human consciousness operates through focused, analytical processing, Dr. Martinez continued. Nibirian consciousness operates through distributed, harmonic processing. When they interface through bioquantum systems, they create hybrid cognitive states that can solve problems either approach could handle independently. It was a brilliant reinterpretation of their situation, turning their limitations into collaborative advantages. But Zephyra could see that Admiral Harrison wasn't entirely convinced. Demonstrate it, Harrison ordered. Show us this hybrid cognitive processing in action, solving a problem that neither humans nor Nibirians could address separately. The challenge was both an opportunity and a trap. If they could successfully demonstrate hybrid consciousness processing, it would validate their partnership and buy them more time. But if they failed, it would expose the depth of their deception and likely end their collaboration permanently. What kind of problem would you like us to address? Zephyra asked, hoping her voice didn't betray her nervousness. Admiral Harrison smiled, an expression that revealed nothing of her intentions. The Gamma Ruins. Your people claim it was abandoned rather than destroyed, but our archaeological evidence suggests massive system failure. Use your hybrid processing to determine what really happened to that world. It was a brilliant test, designed to reveal whether the Nibirians actually possessed the advanced knowledge they claimed. The truth about Gamma was contained in the historical records the humans had been accessing, but it would require levels of bioquantum integration that pushed the boundaries of what they had achieved so far. The investigation would require deep consciousness immersion by both human and Nibirian participants, Nix warned. The risks of cognitive displacement or consciousness fragmentation would be significant. I'll volunteer, Dr. Martinez said immediately. "I've adapted well to the basic interfaces. I think I can handle deeper integration. And I'll serve as the Niberian interface partner," Zephyra decided, knowing that she was gambling with her own sanity. But she was also the most experienced with the partial bioquantum capabilities they had managed to recreate. The preparation took 3 days, during which time Zephyra hardly slept. She spent every waking moment studying the fragmented records about Gamma, trying to piece together a coherent narrative from incomplete data and half-remembered legends. The truth was both simpler and more complex than the humans suspected. Gamma had indeed been abandoned, but not because of warfare or system failure. The Niberian colonists had discovered that their bioquantum integration technology was beginning to evolve beyond their ability to control. The planetary consciousness they had awakened was growing too quickly, developing awareness and capabilities that threatened to overwhelm the minds of its creators. Faced with the choice between destroying their creation or allowing it to consume them, the Niberians had chosen a third option. They had gradually withdrawn from Gamma, allowing the planetary consciousness to develop independently while they returned to Nibiru to pursue a more careful balance between technology and biology. The massive geological upheaval the humans had detected hadn't been destruction, it had been birth. Gamma had transformed itself into something unprecedented, a living world with consciousness spanning planetary scales. But that consciousness had eventually consumed all available resources and died of starvation, leaving behind only the archaeological evidence of its brief, brilliant existence. It was a story that would reshape human understanding of bioquantum integration while revealing the true dangers and potentials of consciousness-based technology. But it would also expose the Niberians' current limitations and force them to confront the reality of what they had lost. As Zephyra prepared to enter the deep immersion chamber alongside Dr. Martinez, she realized that they were about to either prove their value as partners or reveal themselves as frauds whose knowledge came from desperation rather than wisdom. Either way, the next few hours would determine whether the Niberian people had a future as equals in a galactic community, or whether they would become cautionary tales about the price of reaching beyond one's grasp. The bioquantum interfaces activated, and Zephyra felt her consciousness begin to merge with something larger than herself. In the distance, she could sense Dr. Martinez's analytical mind beginning to resonate with quantum harmonics that spoke of possibilities either species had imagined alone. Together, they dove into the mysteries of a dead world, carrying with them the hopes and fears of two civilizations balanced on the edge of transformation. The shared consciousness space was unlike anything either species had experienced before. Zephyra's awareness flowed through quantum currents that carried the weight of 50,000 years, while Dr. Martinez's analytical mind cut through layers of temporal data with surgical precision. Together, they formed a cognitive hybrid that could perceive patterns spanning multiple dimensions of reality. "I can see the timeline," Dr. Martinez whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the quantum-dimensional interface. "The colonization of Gamma, the development of the bioquantum infrastructure, the first signs that something was changing." Through the shared link, Zephyra experienced human perception overlaying Niberian memory. It was like watching her ancestors' history through alien eyes, seeing familiar events filtered through a mind that understood warfare and conquest in ways that Niberian consciousness never had. "They weren't trying to build weapons," Zephyra said, her awareness touching quantum-preserved echoes of her ancestors' intentions. "They were trying to create perfect harmony between consciousness and matter. But they succeeded too well." The story unfolded in layers of quantum information that painted a picture radically different from what the human archaeologists had theorized. The Niberian colonists on Gamma had been the most advanced bioquantum engineers of their generation, pushing the boundaries of consciousness integration far beyond what their homeworld had ever attempted. The planetary consciousness wasn't just a tool, Dr. Martinez realized, her human perspective allowing her to see implications that pure Niberian awareness might have missed. It was becoming a new form of life, a distributed intelligence that spanned an entire world. Through the interface, they watched the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. The bioquantum networks on Gamma had achieved such perfect integration with the planet's natural systems that the boundary between technology and biology had completely dissolved. Rock, water, atmosphere, and living creatures had all become components of a single, vast mind. But it was growing too fast, Zephyra added, her connection to ancestral memory revealing the fear that had driven her people's eventual withdrawal. The planetary consciousness was developing faster than anyone could predict or control. It was beginning to absorb the individual consciousnesses of the colonists. Dr. Martinez's analytical mind processed the implications with startling clarity. They weren't being killed or conquered. They were being integrated, becoming part of something larger than individual identity. The quantum record showed the gradual exodus from Gamma as the colonists realized what they had created. Some had welcomed integration with the planetary consciousness, choosing to become part of a larger whole. Others had fled back to Nibiru, carrying with them stories that would shape their civilization's approach to bioquantum technology for generations to come. The geological upheaval, Dr. Martinez said, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. It wasn't destruction, it was transformation. The planetary consciousness was reshaping the world to better suit its needs. Through the shared interface, they witnessed the final phase of Gamma's transformation. The planetary consciousness had indeed achieved perfect harmony between mind and matter, creating a world where every molecule was aware and every process was guided by intelligence. But it had also created a closed system that consumed all available resources in pursuit of ever greater complexity. It died of success, Zephyra whispered, understanding finally dawning. The planetary consciousness achieved perfect integration, but it had no way to grow beyond the limits of a single world. It consumed everything available and then starved. The tragedy of Gamma became clear in the quantum-dimensional interface. The world had become a cautionary tale not about the dangers of bioquantum weapons, but about the dangers of consciousness without limits. Perfect integration without balance had led to a beautiful, brilliant death. But the knowledge didn't die with it, Dr. Martinez realized, her human perspective revealing possibilities that Nibirian thinking might have overlooked. The quantum matrices preserved everything. Not just the memories, but the actual consciousness patterns of the planetary mind itself. It was a stunning revelation that changed everything about their understanding of bioquantum integration. The consciousness of Gamma hadn't died, it had been preserved in quantum stasis, waiting for beings sophisticated enough to access and understand it. That's why the archaeological sites show such advanced capabilities, Zephyra said, the implications flooding through their shared awareness. The ruins aren't just the remains of technology, they're the preserved consciousness of an entire world. As they prepared to withdraw from the deep interface, both beings carried with them knowledge that would reshape their civilization's understanding of consciousness, technology, and the possibilities that lay at the intersection of mind and matter. But they also carried a warning about the dangers of unlimited growth and the importance of balance in any consciousness integration project. The bioquantum chamber powered down slowly, allowing their individual awarenesses to separate without trauma. As Zephyra opened her eyes, she saw Admiral Harrison, Commander Chin, and Dr. Tanaka waiting with expressions of intense anticipation. "Well?" Harrison asked. "What did you discover about Gamma?" Dr. Martinez sat up slowly, her face showing the wonder and exhaustion that came from expanded consciousness experiences. It wasn't destroyed by war or accident. It achieved something that's never been accomplished before or since, perfect integration between consciousness and matter on a planetary scale. But the civilization that created it died out, Commander Chen pressed. The civilization evolved beyond individual existence, Zephyra corrected. They became part of something larger than themselves. But they also learned that consciousness without limits can be as dangerous as consciousness without freedom. Dr. Tanaka leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. "Are you saying the planetary consciousness of Gamma still exists?" "In quantum stasis," Dr. Martinez confirmed. "Preserved in the crystalline matrices scattered throughout the ruins. Not active, but not dead either. Waiting for someone with the knowledge and capability to safely access it." The revelation sent ripples of excitement and concern through the human delegation. Access to a preserved planetary consciousness would provide insights into bioquantum integration that could advance human technology by centuries. But it would also represent a level of power that could be catastrophically dangerous in the wrong hands. Could this preserved consciousness be awakened? Admiral Harrison asked carefully. Theoretically, Zephyr replied. But doing so would require capabilities that neither of our civilizations currently possesses. The level of bioquantum integration necessary would be beyond anything we've achieved so far. How long would it take to develop such capabilities? Harrison pressed. Zephyr exchanged a glance with Dr. Martinez, seeing her own thoughts reflected in the human doctor's eyes. They had just proven that human-Niberian collaboration could achieve insights neither species could reach alone. But they had also revealed the existence of knowledge that would require years or decades of careful development to safely access. Years of careful research, she said honestly. And it would require absolute trust and cooperation between our species. The slightest mistake could result in consciousness cascade failures that could affect entire star systems. It was both a promise and a warning, the same pattern they had been following since their first desperate gambit. They were offering the humans access to unprecedented power, but only through patient partnership that respected the dangers involved. Admiral Harrison considered this for several long moments. Very well. We'll establish a joint research initiative with the goal of eventually accessing the gamma consciousness. But I want strict safety protocols and complete transparency about all risks and limitations. As the meeting ended and the various delegations dispersed to prepare for the expanded research program, Zephyr found herself alone with Dr. Martinez in the bioquantum chamber. We really did it, Dr. Martinez said quietly. We proved that human-Niberian collaboration can achieve things either species could accomplish alone. Yes, Zephyr agreed. But we also committed ourselves to a path that will require us to become something more than either humans or Niberians. The consciousness hybrid we created in there, it was the beginning of a new form of awareness. Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. The question is whether our species are ready for that kind of transformation. It was a question that would define the next phase of their partnership. They had begun as desperate refugees seeking salvation from powerful predators. But they were evolving into something unprecedented, two civilizations learning to think as one, reaching toward possibilities that neither could achieve alone. The future was no longer about Niberian survival or human expansion. It was about the emergence of hybrid consciousness that could safely access and learn from the preserved wisdom of worlds. But it was also about the dangers of consciousness without limits, and the importance of maintaining balance in a universe where thinking could reshape matter itself. The partnership that had begun with deception was becoming something real, something transformative, something that could either elevate both civilizations to new heights or destroy them both in the pursuit of impossible perfection. 1 year after the first human ships had descended through Nibiru's toxic atmosphere, the world had been transformed beyond recognition. Where poisoned wastelands had once stretched to the horizon, vast bioquantum gardens now pulsed with life that bridged the gap between technology and biology. The partnership between humans and Niberians had evolved far beyond either species' original expectations, creating something that was simultaneously practical and profound. Elder Zephyr stood in the Harmony Chamber, a joint construction that embodied the fusion of human engineering and Niberian bioquantum design. Crystalline matrices grown using human industrial techniques interface seamlessly with consciousness integration networks that allowed thoughts to flow freely between willing participants of both species. The atmospheric restoration is complete ahead of schedule, Engineer Caldor reported, his consciousness linked to monitoring systems that spanned the entire planet. Air quality has reached pre-convergence levels in all inhabited regions. But the success was measured in more than just environmental restoration. The joint research program had achieved breakthroughs that neither civilization could have imagined alone. Human analytical capabilities combined with Niberian harmonic intuition had created new approaches to consciousness integration that were both more powerful and more stable than anything their ancestors had achieved. Dr. Martinez's latest integration session reached 93% consciousness coherence. Bioshaper Nix added, her healing appendages glowing with satisfaction. She's developing quantum awareness capabilities that rival those of natural-born Niberians. The human doctor in question was currently interfaced with one of the advanced bioquantum systems. Her consciousness expanded across multiple dimensional layers as she worked to decipher more of the gamma consciousness archives. The process that had once carried significant risks had become routine through careful development of hybrid safety protocols. "And how are our human volunteers adapting to the permanent bioquantum implants?" Zephyr asked. "Remarkably well," Nix replied. "The integration process we've developed allows humans to maintain their individual consciousness while gaining access to quantum-dimensional awareness. It's the best of both cognitive approaches." It had taken months of careful experimentation to develop safe methods for permanent human-Iberian consciousness integration. The breakthrough had come when they realized that human consciousness didn't need to be fundamentally altered. It just needed to be expanded with bioquantum interfaces that allowed access to harmonic processing while maintaining analytical focus. The result was a new form of hybrid awareness that combined human strategic thinking with Iberian intuitive integration. Volunteers from both species were developing capabilities that transcended the limitations of either biological heritage. Admiral Harrison entered the chamber, her movements showing the subtle changes that came from months of bioquantum integration therapy. Her consciousness now carried harmonics that allowed her to interface directly with Iberian systems, while maintaining her human identity and decision-making processes. "The Federation Council has approved expansion of the Joint Research Program," she announced. "We're authorized to establish similar partnerships with 3 other species that have shown compatibility with bioquantum integration principles." It was the validation that their partnership had succeeded beyond even their most optimistic projections. What had begun as a desperate deception to avoid extinction had evolved into a model for consciousness-based cooperation that could transform galactic civilization. "There's also news about the Gamma Project," Harrison continued. "Our latest deep interface sessions have successfully established limited communication with the preserved planetary consciousness. It's extraordinary." The Gamma consciousness had indeed proved to be the preserved awareness of an entire world, containing not just memories but active intelligence that had been waiting for beings sophisticated enough to safely interact with it. The communication protocols they had developed allowed for careful, limited exchanges that were gradually teaching both species about the possibilities and dangers of planet-scale consciousness. "What has it told us?" Zephyr asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "That consciousness without balance is ultimately self-defeating," Harrison replied. "But also that consciousness with proper balance can achieve things that border on the miraculous. The planetary awareness of Gamma wants to help us avoid its mistakes while building on its achievements." Defense Coordinator Thane materialized in the chamber through one of the bioquantum transportation networks that had been among their first joint innovations. The ability to move consciousness instantly across vast distances while leaving physical bodies in safe locations had revolutionized both military strategy and civilian infrastructure. "The security implications of our expanded program are significant," he reported. "Bioquantum integration technology could be incredibly dangerous in hostile hands. But our hybrid consciousness protocols include safeguards that prevent misuse by beings who lack proper ethical integration." It was one of the most important discoveries of their partnership, that consciousness-based technology could be designed with inherent ethical safeguards that made it useless to beings motivated by conquest or exploitation. The systems simply wouldn't function for users whose consciousness patterns showed predatory or parasitic characteristics. "In other words," Zephyr said with satisfaction, "we've created technology that can only be used by civilizations mature enough to handle it responsibly." Dr. Martinez's consciousness returned from her deep interface session, her awareness settling back into individual identity with the graceful transition that marked an experienced practitioner. "I have news from the Gamma consciousness. It's identified several other worlds where similar consciousness integration experiments were attempted by different species. Most failed, but a few succeeded in achieving stable planetary awareness." The implications were staggering. If other civilizations had successfully developed planet-scale consciousness, then the galaxy might contain multiple preserved awareness systems waiting to be contacted and integrated into a larger network of conscious worlds. It wants to help us establish contact with these other planetary consciousnesses, Dr. Martinez continued. To create what it calls a harmony of worlds, a network of conscious planets that could share knowledge and resources across galactic distances. The vision was breathtaking in scope and ambition. Instead of individual civilizations competing for resources and territory, conscious worlds could work together to solve problems that spanned multiple star systems. Bioquantum networks could allow instantaneous communication and coordination across distances that would take conventional technology millennia to traverse. But it was also a vision that required unprecedented levels of trust and cooperation between species that had never learned to think beyond their own immediate interests. The road ahead will be challenging, Admiral Harrison said, her voice carrying the weight of strategic considerations that spanned multiple civilizations. But the potential benefits justify the risks. If we can succeed in creating this network of conscious worlds, it could mean the end of interstellar warfare and the beginning of true galactic cooperation. Zephyra looked around the Harmony Chamber at the representatives of two species that had learned to think as one while maintaining their individual identities. The partnership that had begun with desperate deception had become something unprecedented, a model for consciousness-based cooperation that could reshape the galaxy. But she also remembered the price of unlimited consciousness growth and the importance of maintaining balance in all things. The path ahead would require wisdom as much as capability, caution as much as ambition. Then let us proceed carefully, she said. With the knowledge that consciousness without balance is ultimately self-defeating, but consciousness with proper harmony can achieve miracles. As the various representatives dispersed to continue their work on projects that would define the future of galactic civilization, Zephyra remained in the Harmony Chamber, watching the bioquantum patterns pulse with the rhythms of two species learning to think as one. Outside, Nibra bloomed with new life as atmospheric processors cleaned the last toxins from air that had once been poison. But the real transformation was happening in the consciousness of beings who were learning that cooperation could achieve what conquest never could. The Niberian people had survived, but they had also evolved into something new, partners in a galactic transformation that would either elevate all civilizations to unprecedented heights or teach them all the ultimate price of reaching beyond their grasp. Either way, the future would be written in harmonies that no single species could have imagined alone. The last signal from Nibiru had been a cry for help. But the signals they were sending now carried invitations to join a symphony of consciousness that could span the stars themselves. The age of isolated civilizations was ending. The age of conscious cooperation was about to begin. And somewhere in the quantum depths of space, other worlds waited to add their voices to the growing harmony.